Hi everyone, Doug Gray here. Welcome to another episode of Holistic Professional Success. And today we're going to talk about genetics and the role it plays in your clinic. Hi everyone. We're going to be talking about something today that a lot of people feel is complicated or too out there for them to worry about in their clinic, when in all reality, the importance of this thing called methylation or genetics, worried about DNA and those types of things, is something that really is becoming mainstream, at least in part, and something you should look at to be a part of your clinic. So let's get into it today. So when we talk about genetics and DNA, there's a little bit of a history that I want to go through, and a lot of it comes down to eventually us talking about something called methylation. So let's just get into it, the importance of it in your clinic and on a daily basis. Now, one of the most important concepts to understand is that genes are not your destiny. And I think that for many years, it's been thought that your genes, whatever they are, that's your destiny, whether you're going to be fat, whether you're going to be skinny, whether you're going to have a high risk for heart disease or low risk or high risk for diabetes, cancer, arthritis, all those things. And in reality, we know with the latest research that your genes are not your destiny. They might lay out some risk factors and things that we need to work on, but it's not your genetics or your genes. It's actually epigenetics, or your ability to control your genes with your lifestyle and then the people you're around, the choices you make, and so on. So there's a list of different factors in the body we call SNPs or SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphism. And these SNPs are in our genes that when there's a little bit of a problem or a genetic, some people call it deficiency, but it's called a SNP, that will cause different things to happen in the body or make it so that it's easier for things to go wrong. And a good way to explain what I'm talking about and how it applies to you in your clinic is this. Let's say we have a barrel, and that barrel is full of water almost all the way to the top. And when we're talking about your genes, and that it so happens that the gene that affects, let's say, heart disease in the body, that you have a SNP with it, you have a problem with that. And so that barrel's pretty high to the top. And so it's easy to live a lifestyle as such that it goes over the top, that we have serious problems occur because genetically our bucket, or in this case barrel, is filled pretty high. And then the lifestyle gets us sooner versus someone whose genetics, that bucket isn't very high. Their cholesterol HDL ratio is lower, C-reactive protein or different things that affect their risk factors low. They don't have that SNP in their gene code. And so it takes a lot more to fill that barrel up so that it finally runs over. In other words, causes these effects in the body. But really, it comes down to that lifestyle. It's still the ability to choose your lifestyle and different things that determines if and when that barrel runs over. So I don't know if that makes sense enough to y'all, but that's basically the way genetics work. And so we know that there's all kinds of genetic SNPs, and we know there's all kinds of ways that the body will work to be able to keep those problems, if you would, those genetic SNPs under control. And so in 19th century, Charles Darwin, we all know the origin of species, talked about genetics and really understood the importance, at least of not necessarily you believe in evolution or not, but in the understanding of genetics and its role, and the fact that our lifestyle really can control a lot of our genetics and what happens. In the 19th century, there's a guy named Gregory Mandel, and he was able to understand that there were different generations, and the ability for, you remember the square with the four possibilities with it, and depending on the genes would determine everything from what color your eyes and your hair and everything else, and your different risk factors. And so then they did what we call Human Genome Project. It started back in 1990, and in 2000 it had a rough draft. In other words, they were about 92% complete. And then 2003, they were 99.99% complete. In other words, they were able to map the human genome. And we get the companies like 23andMe and Ancestry and all those, because now we're able to look at your DNA and look at these SNPs, or these risk factors. And so many of you done that to find out, where you came from, what countries, different things like that, your risk factor for different disease. Well, it's important because from that you hear of different things like the SNP called the MTHFR gene, where people are worried about that if they have it, that it might cause ADD or ADHD and problems. And so they understand the importance of methylated vitamins, B12, and so on, versus synthetics. And that if you take in the right forms of methylated nutrients, that it helps with that gene. That's just one example of a very popular gene. You might have people come into your clinics and say, hey, I have the MTHFR gene. You're like, what is that? Well, just know that these SNPs, the single nucleotide polymorphisms, are just genetic SNPs that tell you that they're a higher risk factor of different things. And you can help with that, with the epigenetics, with the lifestyle. And there's ways to control that. So the absolute expert, in my opinion, in the world today is 3 times over PhD, Dr. Mark Harris. And he travels with us to teach these methylation seminars all over the nation. And if you haven't been to one, I'd highly recommend it. It's a 3-day seminar that's just phenomenal, that goes over methylation. So it's easier to understand and explain to your patients. And it goes so in depth that you're able to come back and at least speak simply the basic versions of it to your patients. So even if they come in, your patients say, I read 23andMe or an Ancestry, what does it mean health-wise or nutritionally or structurally? And you're able to help them with it once you understand that. And it really helps build your credibility. But on March 23rd, 2013, the gene sequencing, the Salk Institute talked about gene sequencing, and they said it's not the answer to solving the problems of human health. And much of the research currently being done is irrelevant, because we really need to look at the epigenetics and the lifestyle that affects it. And so that's really what we focus on. And that was Francis Crick. Now, the key with methylation is to understand that methylation is the ability to add, I'm going to simplify it, life to a molecule. Basically, we're adding the things that nature does when we eat raw foods. We're adding the methyl group. And that methyl group for some people is critical, because genetically their barrel is filled up and it's about to run over. And when they have non-methylated or synthetic processed type foods or nutrients that come into the body, then it's easy to run over. But if they take the organic methylated nutrients, again, most prevalent they talk about is B vitamins, then they're able to keep that from running over. But the same holds true with many areas like diabetes, heart disease, arthritis, all of these different conditions that people have different risk factors for, but it's still the same answer. It is the lifestyle. And so understanding some of the genes and the DNA and how they affect the body and what you can do about it is important. So again, I highly recommend you look into the methylation seminar and be able to help with that. There's an example that Dr. Harris uses of honeybees, and when why is the queen so much larger than the others? Because she's one that eats the most, the healthiest of the royal honey, if you would. And genetically, they're the same, but she's able to grow much larger and be healthier because she's the one eating healthier. And it doesn't have anything to do with the genetics more than the epigenetics, the lifestyle that she lives. So I think that it's important to understand that in the same way, it's a lot more about us living a healthy lifestyle. It's about us making better choices, making sure that we're don't have subluxations, that we're able to eat healthier and eat more raw foods, more methylated foods, and take back the nutrients that are needed to help with it, so that we're able to have epigenetics come into play, that we're able to have ability to control how far that water comes up in that barrel before it pours out and causes disease, that we're able to keep under control no matter where it's at in that barrel to start with, no matter where our genetics are to start with. And so it's really critical, I think, that we understand that when we're talking about genetics and they're going down this road of splicing genes and doing all these different things, so far have caused problems that they can create a baby with a certain hair or eyes or different things, or even strength levels or speed levels, and that's all in the genetic, but it increases the risk factor of cancer dramatically. So that's why you don't see it being done all the time. But we're playing with something, in my opinion, that probably shouldn't be done. But maybe someday they'll get it in a way that will save many lives in that. But that's really not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about is the ability to control your genes, your genetics through epigenetics, through lifestyle. And once you understand the basics of genes, of DNA, being able to understand SNPs and how they affect the body and even test for them, then you're able to help patients at a much higher level and be able to speak to them when they do come in with these tests and know what to say and what to do. And so there are different methylation pathways. And the methylation pathways, when you come to a seminar, you look at it, they're all over the place. There are so many of them, and you're like, oh, it's way too much. But once you really get the basics, the foundations, like anything else, when you go to a book, if you want to know the most about any subject, you get the 101 of that book. Recommend going and buying a college book. 101 anatomy, right? 101 organic chemistry, 101 nutrition. That's where you're taught the basics, nutrition, about macronutrients, carbs, proteins, and fats versus micronutrients, your vitamins and your minerals and those things. So it's a 101 that you get taught about genetics. And once you understand that, then all of a sudden, when you see these charts full of the methylation pathways, and there's so many things, they're not confusing. You at least understand what they're talking about. So I highly recommend that. It's just another tool in your tool chest to understand genetics and about methylation and about SNPs to be able to help you in your clinic. So there's different things that provide methyl donors to allow you to methylate nutrients or methylate the body. Foods like onions, garlic, beets, nutrients like creatine, a huge one that people misunderstand a lot, that has a lot of methyl donors, and they'll supply these methyl nutrients or these methyl groups, if you would, to the body, so that the body then can help repair or to counteract the factors of your DNA problems or lifestyle problems that have caused issues in the body. So you'll learn about those types of things and about the foods that provide those types of methyl donors or conserving donors. And we'll give you one last example, is that there is a snip called the Inos snip. So it's one of these SNPs, these problems that are in our DNA code, that if you have it, the INOS, it's basically when you're susceptible to a free radical in the body called the peroxynitrite radical. And this SNP, this Inos SNP, can cause a lot of problems in the body. It can cause not just basic symptoms, but from cancers and different things like that long term, but it can cause daily problems of anxiety and stress issues, and that if we go in and through lifestyle, once we know if you have this SNP through a 23andMe test, Ancestry, or Dr. Harris teaches a way to do applied kinesiology testing to test for it while you're at the seminar, so you don't have to send off for tests, that you're able to take a look at that and be able to then fix it with lifestyle. And so that's just one of the SNPs, the Inos SNP, and there's many, many, many more, like the MTHFR and others that you learn about. So whether you come to a Dr. Harris seminar at the OHS or another one, or get the basics of 101 genetics and methylation, learn those basics so that when patients come in, that you're able to answer them at the least, and even at the most be able to promote that you understand and can help people with genetic factors, that genes are not your destiny, that it is about the lifestyle you live, and you promote as a holistic professional the lifestyle that allows people to make those changes, to come in, to be able to have proper nerve function and flow in the body and nutrient levels at levels that can be able to counteract any SNPs or gene deficiencies in the body. So number one, learn about methylation, learn about genes and the genetics when it comes down to these SNPs in the body, whether it is just a small 101 course, come to a methylation course, whatever it might be, so that you'll be able to help your patients have that extra tool in your toolbox to be able to help them reach optimal health. give OHS a call, 1-800-890-4547. Ask about the latest methylation seminar or some of the information so that you can get up to speed to help your patients reach optimal health. Remember, keep chewing.